morning. This is Bill Nolan again from the Williams Group. As we mentioned earlier, instead of doing protracted long 45-minute to 1-hour webinars, we've decided to touch on 4 or 5 really important areas when you as an optometrist are thinking about transitioning your practice, whatever modality that you choose to do that through. And so we thought we'd just break apart a few things, and we would discuss them in just more 5 or 6 minute vignette segments that might be just easier to digest. And then if you have any further questions, if they pique your interest in any way, if you have further interest, we'd obviously be happy to schedule a call with you or by email to discuss further anything we discussed this morning or your future plans for transitioning. Second thing we're going to talk about this morning, there's several different, there's probably 50, maybe there might be 500 different reasons and topics to cover, but we just kind of broke it into 5 to get started with. And the second one we're going to talk about is asking myself, what am I really selling when I sell my practice? And that may sound very, very obvious to most of you, or you might think, well, doesn't that come easily to everybody what it is that I'm selling? But when I've asked that question at many national meetings, I was out west a couple of years ago before COVID, and I was at one of the state association meetings, and I asked the doctors, there were 100 doctors in the room. I said, doctors, when you sell your practice, what is it that you're selling? So like many of you, we got a lot of the standard answers. I'm selling my frame inventory, which of course is correct. I'm selling my chairs, my stands. Yes, that's correct. I'm selling slit lamps. So everybody kind of enumerated and enunciated all the hard assets that they're selling. And so one of the doctors in the back said, I've got a feeling we haven't hit the answer yet, Bill. And I said, no, all of those are to some extent correct. But what I'm really selling when I sell my optometric practice is I'm really selling my book of business. I'm selling a stream of cash flow that is generated by my patient base. And a good way to think about that, doctors, if you have a young doctor that is looking at buying your practice, or you're thinking about bringing a young doctor into your practice, or you're thinking about selling your practice to a private equity group or some other third party, what you're really selling is not the frames and the inventory and the chairs and stands, because those things are readily available through any ophthalmic supplier. Any one of you today, if you needed another chair, stand, or slit lamp or phoropter, you could pick up the phone, and there are 5 or 6 large ophthalmic vendors in the country, and they would have that equipment in your office by Friday of this week. So that really, in a way, is not what I'm selling. What I'm selling is my patient base, my goodwill. That is what we refer to that in accounting, that book of business, if you will. And along with that book of business comes my chairs and stands and phoropters and all of those other things. The reason that is really important is because knowing what it is you're selling, and if we can all be in agreement that what I'm actually selling is that stream of income, then that has big implications in the way a transaction can be structured. And here's why. If I'm a young let's take a traditional transition where I, as a young optometrist who've been out of optometry school 5 years, and I'm deciding to buy your practice. And let's just say for this morning that I'm going to buy all of your practice. So if I'm contracting to buy all of your practice, most optometrists, I would say in all the hundreds of deals I've been involved in, I would say that in 80% of the transactions, the optometrist wants to be able to stay and practice for some period of time after the sale of the business. Probably in only 20% of the transactions does an optometrist say to me, I want to just hand the keys off and walk away into the sunset. And I'd prefer not to practice at all. That just doesn't happen very often. And there's a lot of reasons for that, not the least of which is I may just financially still need the income for a period of time. So if in fact what I'm selling is my book of business, my earnings, my income, then whether I can stay after the sale or not, and how much money I can be paid by the new owners of the business is really a function of how big that income stream is. So if I'm selling, and this sometimes can be very difficult initially to understand, but if I'm selling my practice to a young optometrist, I'm selling my practice to my partners, I'm selling my practice to private equity. For the buyer of the practice, I have to be able to fund the buyout, whether I'm paying you directly, whether I'm paying Wells Fargo because I borrowed the money to buy it. I have to be able to pay myself. If I'm a young optometrist and I'm buying all of the practice, I need to be able to pay myself, obviously. I've got to be able to pay my student loans back, which now in most of the optometry schools, the class that'll graduate this year will be well in excess of $200,000. So I've got to be able to service that debt, service the debt to buy the practice, pay myself. And so depending on how big the stream of income, there may or may not be enough income left over to pay you to stay on and continue to see patients. In our first segment this morning, we were talking about value, and I said that value was not the most important thing, but was a very important thing. And I said that in most transactions, value ultimately doesn't become a great problem in the transactions I've been involved with, because in today's world, there's been so much written and discussed about the value of a practice. But here's what does become a big issue. It is very difficult in most practices for me to sell 100% of my practice and then contract with the new owner to stay on and be paid at or near what I was making as an owner, as an employee after the sale. That is almost in every case a deal breaker. If the practice is being financed by a commercial bank, for example, and I have a contract with the seller to work 3 days a week for $1,000 a day, the commercial bank is going to put that and build that into the cash flows. And they may come back and say to the buyer, you can hire Dr. Smith 2 days a week, but she can only make $500 a day and can only work 2 days a week, because that is all the cash flow will support. So one thing, doctor, I think that when you understand, that's why we started with that question, what is it that I'm really selling? What I'm selling is that stream of income. And no matter how big your practice is or how small, it makes no difference. There's only so much money that sits on the table at the end of the day to pay yourself with. And so if that is what I'm selling to a new owner, then what will determine how much I can work for how long and for how much will be based on that stream of income. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions about that or how that impacts the sale of your practice, we'd certainly be happy again to visit with you at the Williams Group. Thank you.